Ladies and gentlemen, it's really, really sad that a good third speech from China had to begin on 3 straw man arguments that they told us we made. Let's go through the 3 supposed, terrible structural arguments that we failed to get that they pointed out. Number 1 is that we never engage with the middle ground, despite the fact that Fed does this in 3 minutes of his 8-minute speech, is third, and also comprehensively wins this, as I'll show you later on. But number 2 is that we push them to make a counter policy, which we say, when did we ever push you to say this, and why was it that you guys kept saying this throughout the bench when we never mentioned this even once? And finally was this idea that we had no conception about how anger and these comments lead to hate crime, which again highlights the fact that they never were able to deal with the idea of people egging other people on and creating hate crimes on their side. These are the facts, ladies and gentlemen. Opposition could not engage with our principles. Opposition could not tell us why we would lead to less hate crimes on their side, or why it was even good on their side, why it was even better with bigots on their side, and opposition couldn't engage with the middle ground. That's why they tried to strawman this argument and not actually respond to the things that we gave you. 3 main questions, 3 main stakeholders were big questions in this debate. Number 1 is about bigots and who best deals with bigots. Number 2 is about who best deals with the middle ground, which is the thing they tried to pivot on when they loaded a bunch of new arguments in third. And the third idea was about rights and which side better protects rights, something they gave actually 3 seconds of their reply speech to. That was a major debate-winning argument with our speech in this debate. So on this idea about bigots, right? Because at the best and final conception of their argumentation about bigots, they told us that we would push bigots underground into concentrated chat rooms, etc., that would allow them to make their hateful ideology even worse. The problem with that is when Ved gives you the response to that argument, which is to say this allows them to A, better police them, and B, means that they have no effect over the middle ground of people. No, this explicitly deals with the middle ground of people, which they say we don't deal with. We tell you that the fact that they didn't respond to this means that they ultimately lose this point necessarily. But let's take them at their very best conception, right? Let's even accept the fact on third, which they tell us no side actually solves bigotry. We think we won this debate comprehensively in the middle ground as well. And that brings me on to my second point, which is which side better convinces people in the middle that racism is bad and that it's really, really wrong. So in third, they give us a lot of new material. It's something about how on their side you hear see people anti-Trump or something like that, and this means that somehow you end up less racist, and Trump has loads of backlash against him, right? So we say probably Trump has some backlash against him, but also he's now the GOP nomination, and this means that he does have a lot of momentum and has a lot of voice in society, right? Insofar as he's probably convinced a large swath of the population to be racist, that's probably a really, really bad thing, and that's the middle ground that they totally destroy on their side. We tell you that if Trump had to not do this in order to win votes, it's likely he wouldn't be a politician on that side, and likely we wouldn't have to deal with this hate in the first place, right? But secondly, they fail to tell you about how on their side they still have to deal with a culture of hatred, which is to say that Fed's arguments weren't all specific in general. We told you about the idea of creating a culture where people have passive aggressions against people who don't see them as being legitimate, who don't want to have a conversation with people just because of hatred and that sort of thing. We tell you in that situation, they failed to deal with one of the biggest points on their side. But finally, ladies and gentlemen, this debate was about rights as well, right? Because insofar as the opposition's entirety of their first speech, or most of their first speech, was about the idea of having the right to freedom of speech and freedom of thought, the fact that they dropped that shows you how comprehensively they lost it, right? Why did they lose it? Because we told you on our side that not only are you protecting people against harming their freedom of speech, which on net we make better on our side because we protect the freedom of speech of minorities and the people who are being harmed, who are actively a bigger group than the racists. So even on net, utilitarian principle, we think we win on that thing. But also we told you that it's about freedom of against bodily harm versus freedom of speech and this vacuous idea of freedom of thought. We tell you on our side we're much, much happier to bite the bullet of whatever expansive system of freedom of speech they want us to do on their side, and we still win this debate because we still prove that it's legitimate and helps the most number of people on our side. Ladies and gentlemen, they were unable to deal with the middle ground. They tried to strawman this debate. Don't let them get away with it.